Welcome to my channel, everyone. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Your support truly means the world to me. Today, I'm sharing a story that's very close to my heart. It's about how one surprise from my mom changed everything for our family. Forever. The first snow of December had just begun to fall over Maplewood, a quiet town tucked between frozen lakes and pine trees in northern Michigan. Inside a cozy two-story house, Emily Parker, a 27-year-old nurse, sat by the kitchen window with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Her thoughts were far away, somewhere between the soft memories of her childhood and the heavy silence that now filled her home. Her mom, Margaret, had always been the heart of the family, gentle, warm, and full of quiet strength. But over the past year, something had changed. Since Emily's father passed away, Margaret had seemed lost. Her laughter faded, her eyes often wandering out the window as if she were waiting for something only she could see. Emily tried everything to lift her mom's spirits: weekend trips, surprise dinners, even volunteering together at the community center. But nothing seemed to reach her, until one cold evening in late November, when Margaret called a family meeting. Emily remembered that moment clearly. Her younger brother Daniel, who had recently moved back from college, was sprawled on the couch with his phone when their mom appeared in the doorway. There was something different about her that night, a spark in her eyes. Almost like the old days. "Kids," she began softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I have something to tell you. And it's going to change everything." Emily and Daniel exchanged curious glances. "Mom, you're not," Daniel started, but Margaret lifted a hand and smiled. "No, it's nothing bad, but it's something I've been keeping to myself for a while." Emily leaned forward. "What is it?" Margaret took a deep breath and looked down at her hands. "I've been talking to someone," she said quietly. "Someone special." There was a silence, deep and unexpected. Emily blinked. "Talking like a friend?" Margaret smiled shyly, the kind of smile that made her look 10 years younger. "Yes, a friend. His name is Michael Turner. He lives in Seattle. We met online on a travel forum. Of all places. We've been talking for months." Emily's heart thudded. Her mother, dating again. It felt impossible. And yet, there was something so tender in her mom's eyes that Emily couldn't bring herself to judge. Daniel laughed awkwardly. "Mom, online. That's unexpected." Margaret chuckled softly. "I know, honey, but Michael, he's different. He listens. He understands me." And her voice wavered. "He makes me feel alive again." Emily didn't know what to say. She wanted to be happy for her mom, truly, but she also felt a sudden sting in her chest, a mixture of fear and protectiveness. After losing her dad, it was hard to imagine anyone else stepping into that part of their lives. That night, long after her mom went to bed, Emily sat in the living room, staring at the flickering fireplace. She thought about how lonely her mom must have been, about how brave she was to open her heart again, but also about how fragile love could be. The next few weeks moved quickly. Margaret seemed brighter than she had in years. She started dressing up again, soft scarves, little earrings, her favorite red lipstick. She hummed while cooking, stayed up late laughing over phone calls, and even started planning a trip. One snowy evening, Emily came home to find her mom in the kitchen, baking cinnamon rolls. The sweet scent filled the air, and her face glowed with happiness. "Emily," Margaret said, "I want to tell you something wonderful." Emily smiled nervously. "Another surprise?" Margaret nodded. "Michael's coming to visit. For Christmas." Emily froze. "He's coming here?" "Yes." Her mom's eyes were sparkling. "He wants to meet you and Daniel. And I think he might have something important to say." For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the oven. Emily tried to smile, but her heart raced. Something about this felt too sudden, too fast. What if this man wasn't who he said he was? What if her mom got hurt again? But when she looked into her mother's hopeful face, Emily couldn't say no. "All right," she said softly. "We'll be here." A week later, Christmas Eve arrived. The snow outside glittered like diamonds, and the Parker house glowed with golden lights. Daniel had decorated the tree. Emily had baked her dad's favorite pie, and Margaret, she was glowing with excitement. At exactly 7 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. Margaret's hands trembled as she opened it, and there stood a tall man in a navy coat, holding a single red rose. "Hello, Margaret," he said warmly. "You look even lovelier in person." Emily watched silently. There was something calm, genuine, almost familiar about his voice. Michael wasn't what she expected. He looked gentle, not flashy. There was kindness in his smile. Dinner was surprisingly warm. Michael told stories about his life in Seattle, his late wife, and how he'd spent years traveling alone before meeting Margaret online. Emily found herself laughing just a little at his dry humor. Even Daniel seemed charmed. But as the evening went on, Emily noticed something strange. Michael kept glancing toward the old family piano, the one her dad used to play. When Margaret stepped into the kitchen, Michael stood and walked over to it. He ran his fingers across the dusty keys, then looked at Emily. "Your father loved this piano, didn't he?" he said softly. Emily frowned. "How do you know that?" Michael smiled faintly. "Your mom told me. But also, I think I've seen this piano before." Emily blinked, confused. "Seen it? How?" He looked at her, eyes warm but mysterious. "I'll explain soon. There's something I need to tell you both. Something your mom wanted to wait until tonight to share." The fire crackled softly in the background. Emily's heart began to pound. What could he possibly mean? And just as her mother returned, holding a tray of steaming cocoa, she looked at Michael with a knowing smile, one that carried both joy and fear. He reached for her hand. "Margaret," he said gently, "should we tell them now?" Emily froze. Daniel looked up, puzzled. Margaret took a deep breath, her eyes shimmering. "Yes, it's time." And then she turned to her children. "There's something about Michael, that you both need to know." The room went quiet. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock above the fireplace. Snowflakes brushed gently against the window, glowing in the light of the Christmas tree. Emily could feel her pulse in her ears as her mom's words hung in the air. "There's something about Michael that you both need to know." Daniel straightened in his chair. "Mom, what's going on?" Margaret looked at Michael, then back at her children. Her lips trembled, but her voice was steady. "Michael isn't just someone I met online. He's someone I knew a long time ago." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Michael exhaled slowly, his eyes soft but full of emotion. "Your mom and I knew each other before she met your father." The room fell silent again. Emily's eyes widened. Daniel looked confused. Margaret nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Michael and I met when we were young, before I met your dad. We were both in college, and we loved each other deeply. But life took us in different directions. My father got sick, and I had to come home. I never saw him again after that." Emily leaned back, her breath catching. "You mean, he was your first love?" Margaret smiled sadly. "Yes, my first love." Michael's gaze softened. "And I never stopped thinking about her. Even after I got married, even after all the years that passed, she was always there, somewhere in the back of my heart. When my wife passed away, I found myself on that travel forum, just looking for stories to ease the loneliness. I never expected to find her again." For a moment, no one spoke. The fire popped gently in the silence. Emily's heart softened, but she still felt uneasy. "So all this time, this surprise, was you finding each other again?" Margaret nodded. "That's part of it," she said quietly. "But there's more." Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded envelope. "Your mom wanted you to see this." Emily hesitated, then took the envelope. Inside was an old photograph, a faded picture of a young woman laughing beside a man with bright blue eyes. Emily gasped. "That's you," she whispered, looking at her mom. "And yes," Margaret said softly. "That's Michael. The day before I left college." Daniel stared at the picture, then looked at his mom. "But why tell us this now?" Margaret smiled gently. "Because I realized something this year. Life is too short to keep love hidden. When your father died, I thought that part of me was gone forever. But love doesn't disappear, Daniel. It changes shape. It finds new ways to live." Tears filled Emily's eyes. She wanted to be angry, but instead she felt something unexpected. Understanding, Michael looked at both of them, his voice low and sincere. "I don't want to take your father's place. No one could. I just want to be part of your family, if you'll let me." Emily's heart ached. She remembered how broken her mom had been after losing her dad, the sleepless nights, the silence, the fading smile. And now, sitting before her, was a man who seemed to bring light back into her mother's world. Still, something about the way her mom looked at Michael, something tender but secret, made Emily wonder if there was more to this story than she was being told. As the evening went on, laughter returned to the room. They ate dessert together, told old stories, and even sang softly by the piano. For the first time in years, Emily saw her mom's eyes sparkle again. But when everyone went to bed that night, Emily stayed awake. The old photograph lay on the coffee table, next to the rose Michael had brought. She picked it up and studied it under the warm light of the tree. Her mother looked carefree, radiant, the same smile she'd worn tonight. But there was something else in the photo she hadn't noticed before. In the corner of the picture, half hidden by sunlight, was a small handwritten date, and just below it, initials. Not just M plus M, but 3 letters, M plus M plus. Emily's heart skipped. She leaned closer. The last letter looked faint, almost smudged, but it was clear enough to read .E. Her own initial. Her stomach turned. What did it mean? Was it just a coincidence? Or something else entirely? She folded the photo back into the envelope, her hands trembling. Something told her this surprise her mom had planned wasn't finished yet, and as she glanced toward her mom's room, she saw a light still glowing under the door, and the faint sound of her mom's quiet voice on the phone. Emily couldn't hear the words, but she could tell from her tone something emotional, something she wasn't ready to tell them yet. She didn't know it then, but that conversation would uncover a truth that would shake everything she believed about her family. The next morning, the smell of pancakes and maple syrup filled the kitchen. Emily walked downstairs, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had kept her awake all night. The photograph from last night was still tucked inside her pocket, heavy with questions she wasn't ready to ask. Her mom was at the stove, humming to herself, while Michael sat at the table, reading the morning paper. Everything looked so normal, almost too normal. "Morning, sweetheart," Margaret said cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" Emily forced a smile. "Yeah, mostly," but her mother could always tell when she wasn't fine. Margaret tilted her head, studying her daughter's face. "You've been thinking about what I said last night, haven't you?" Emily hesitated. "A little," she admitted. "It's just a lot to take in." Margaret smiled gently, but there was something sad behind her eyes. "I understand." Michael folded the paper and looked up. "I know this isn't easy for you. I didn't mean to bring any confusion or pain into your family." Emily shook her head. "No, it's not that. I can see how happy you make her. It's just, I keep wondering if there's more to the story." Her mom froze for a second, just a second, then quickly busied herself with the frying pan. "What do you mean, honey?" Emily swallowed hard. She wanted to ask about the photograph, about the faint E written beside her mom's and Michael's initials, but she didn't. "Not yet." "Nothing," she said softly. "Forget it." After breakfast, Michael offered to take them into town for the Christmas festival. The streets of Maplewood were lined with twinkling lights, and carolers sang near the frozen lake. Margaret looked radiant, she laughed, she danced. She held Michael's hand like a woman rediscovering youth, but Emily couldn't stop noticing the small moments, the way her mom's smile faded whenever Michael mentioned his past, or how he sometimes looked at her, not as a stranger, but with a strange tenderness that felt deeper than just friendship. That evening, when they returned home, Emily went to her old bedroom. She sat on the floor and took out the photo again. The initials stared back at her like a secret that refused to rest. She flipped the photo over and for the first time noticed something else. There was writing on the back, faint and smudged from years of age. It read, "If life takes us apart, I'll find my way back to you and to her." Emily's breath caught. And to her. Her fingers trembled. Could her mean me? Before she could think further, there was a gentle knock at her door. It was Michael. "Mind if I come in?" he asked softly. Emily nodded, quickly slipping the photo behind her back. He stepped inside, his face calm but thoughtful. "Your mom went to bed early," he said. "I wanted to talk to you, if that's okay." Emily nodded again, unsure. "Sure." He sat down across from her, his hands clasped together. "I know this must all feel strange. I didn't plan to meet your mother again like this. Life just found its way back." She looked at him, her voice low. "Michael, can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated, then met his gaze. "Did you ever meet me when I was little?" He looked startled for a moment, then smiled faintly. "No, not in person, but I knew about you." "How?" she asked quietly. He looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your mother told me, years ago." Emily frowned. "But how could she tell you? You said you lost contact after college." Michael sighed deeply, pain flickering across his face. "That's what she told you?" "Yes, but there was one letter. Just one. It came to me when I was living in Chicago. She wrote to tell me she was getting married, and that she was expecting a baby." Emily's breath hitched. "A baby?" Michael nodded slowly. "She said she wanted me to know because she felt I deserved the truth, that her heart was torn between the life she was building and the love she once had. She didn't name the child, but she said something I'll never forget. You'll see her in the world one day, and you'll know she carries the same light you once gave me." The room fell silent. Emily could barely breathe. Her mind raced. "Wait," she whispered, shaking her head. "Are you saying?" Michael's eyes softened. full of sorrow and hesitation. I don't want to say anything that would hurt your memory of your father. He was a good man. But, Emily, he paused, voice trembling, there's a chance that I might be more connected to your family than you think. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. You mean, you could be? Before he could answer, a voice came from the doorway. Michael. They both turned. Her mom stood there pale, trembling, holding onto the doorframe. Her eyes were wet with tears. Don't, she said softly. Please, not yet. Emily stood up. Mom, what's going on? What does he mean? Margaret took a step forward, her hands shaking. I was going to tell you both tomorrow. I just needed one more night. Tell us what, Mom? Emily's voice cracked. Margaret looked at her daughter, her expression full of love and pain. The real surprise I planned for Christmas wasn't Michael's visit, she said quietly. It was the truth. The truth I'd been keeping for 27 years. The fire downstairs crackled again, casting a faint glow through the hallway. Michael looked away, his jaw tight. Emily's heart felt like it was breaking, caught between fear and disbelief. Margaret took a deep breath. Emily, she whispered, you deserve to know who your father really was. The wind howled softly outside, carrying flakes of snow that glimmered against the windowpane. Inside, silence filled the Parker home, the kind of silence that comes right before a storm of truth. Emily stood frozen. Her heart raced as her mother's words echoed in her head. You deserve to know who your father really was. Her voice trembled. Mom, what do you mean by that? Margaret sank slowly into the armchair, her hands gripping each other tightly. Michael stood behind her, his face lined with quiet sorrow. I loved your father, Margaret began softly. You need to know that first. He was kind, patient, and gave me a life I could only dream of. But before him, there was another story. One I buried so deep that even I started to forget it. Emily's throat tightened. She felt Daniel's presence beside her now. He had come down the stairs, confused but listening. Margaret looked down, her eyes wet with memories. When I was 21, I met Michael at college. He was my best friend before he became anything else. We dreamed of traveling the world, opening a small art gallery by the ocean, maybe even raising a family one day. But when my father got sick, I had to come back home. I promised Michael I'd return, but life had other plans. Michael's eyes softened as she spoke. Margaret continued, her voice breaking. After months apart, I found out I was pregnant. I was scared, confused, and alone. And then, your father, Robert, came into my life. He knew everything, everything. And still, he chose to stay. Emily's breath caught. Are you saying? Margaret nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, Emily. Michael, he's your biological father. The world seemed to stop. Emily's heart pounded so hard it hurt. Daniel's jaw fell open. No, Emily whispered. No, that can't be. Dad Robert, he raised me. He loved me. He was your father, Margaret said, her voice firm through the tears. In every way that mattered, he was your father. He loved you more than his own life, but he also loved me enough to let me carry the truth until I was ready to share it. Michael stepped forward, his eyes glassy. I never wanted to disrupt your family, Emily. I didn't even know you were mine until years later. When I received your mother's letter, I knew, deep down, that you were the child she spoke of, but she asked me to stay away, to let you grow up in peace. Emily felt dizzy, like the ground beneath her was tilting. She took a shaky step back, tears spilling down her face. Why now? Why would you tell me this after all these years? Margaret reached out, her voice trembling. Because I don't want to leave this world with unfinished truths. Because you deserve to know where you come from. And because Michael's presence here wasn't an accident. It was part of the promise I made to your father before he passed. Emily blinked through her tears. What promise? Margaret took a deep breath. Before your father died, he told me, one day, tell her everything. Don't let her live with half a story. She deserves her whole heart. Michael turned away, wiping his eyes. The room was heavy with emotion, not the kind that destroys but the kind that reveals what's been hidden too long. Daniel, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. So, Emily's father is Michael. And mine was Robert. Margaret nodded weakly. Yes, you both are my children, but your stories began in different chapters. Daniel rubbed his face, sighing. This is a lot. Emily couldn't stop crying. She walked toward the piano, the one Michael had touched the night before. Her dad, Robert, used to play the same instrument every Christmas Eve. She pressed one of the keys. It echoed softly in the quiet room, haunting and beautiful. Michael stepped closer but kept his distance. Emily, he said gently, I don't expect anything from you. Not forgiveness, not acceptance. I just wanted you to know the truth because your mother deserves peace, and because you deserve to know that your life began in love, even if it was complicated. Emily turned slowly. Her eyes met his eyes that, for the first time, she realized mirrored her own. It hit her all at once. The same blue-gray eyes, the same soft jawline, the same quiet strength she'd seen in her reflection her entire life. She whispered, almost to herself, all this time. Margaret stood up, walking over to her daughter. I know I should have told you sooner. I was just afraid you'd see me differently, or that you'd stop loving me, but I kept that secret out of love, not shame. Emily looked between them. Her mother, the woman who had carried her through every heartbreak, and the man, who unknowingly, had been a part of her all along. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, her voice trembling but strong. I don't even know what to feel. Angry, grateful, confused, maybe all of it. But one thing I know, love doesn't just disappear because the story was complicated. Margaret reached for her hand, and Emily let her. Michael stayed still, his face wet with quiet tears. Outside, the snow had stopped. The clouds parted, letting the moonlight spill across the living room floor. Margaret whispered, "That's why I called this Christmas my surprise. Because after all these years, I wanted my family to finally see each other for who we really are. No more secrets, no more pretending. Just truth and love." Emily hugged her mother tightly, feeling her warmth, her heartbeat, the fragility of forgiveness, and when she finally turned toward Michael, she didn't speak. She just nodded, a small, trembling nod that said, I see you. I'm not ready, but I see you. It was enough. For now. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she pulled out the photograph again. The initials M+M+E no longer felt mysterious. They felt like a bridge between past and present. Her mother's laughter from downstairs floated faintly through the air, joined by the deep, steady sound of Michael's voice. For the first time in years, the house didn't sound lonely. It sounded alive. But Emily couldn't shake one last question, a small, quiet one that lingered in her heart. If her mom's first love had returned after all these years, could her own heart also find its way back to something she once lost? The first light of Christmas morning touched the snow outside like gold. The whole world seemed to be wrapped in a quiet peace, the kind that only happens after a storm of truth. Emily woke up early, her heart still heavy but softer than the night before. She sat up in bed, watching the sunlight dance across the frosted window. For the first time in years, the Parker house felt different. Not perfect, but honest, real. Downstairs, she could hear faint laughter. It was her mom and Michael, whispering as they made breakfast. There was something gentle in their voices, not the laughter of new love, but the laughter of people who had found forgiveness after years of silence. Emily took a deep breath and went down. The smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee filled the kitchen again. Just like the first day this all began. Margaret turned with a smile that carried both relief and hope. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Merry Christmas, Mom. Michael looked up from the stove, his smile shy but warm. Merry Christmas, Emily. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled back. Merry Christmas. It wasn't much, but it was a start. They sat together at the table, just the three of them. Daniel had gone to the community center early to help with the annual holiday breakfast for families in need, something their father, Robert, had started years ago. The empty chair at the table, where Robert used to sit, still felt sacred. But instead of sadness, Emily felt gratitude. Her dad had loved her fiercely, even knowing the truth. That kind of love didn't vanish. It became part of the air in that house. As they ate, Margaret reached under the tree and pulled out a small wrapped box. This, she said softly, handing it to Emily, was something your father asked me to give you when the time was right. Emily's hands trembled as she unwrapped it. Inside was a small wooden box, carved with intricate vines and tiny initials are M.P. Roberts' full name. Inside the box lay a folded letter and a silver bracelet. Her breath caught as she opened the letter, written in her father's familiar handwriting. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means your mother has finally been brave enough to tell you the story we both carried for so long. I want you to know something. I never saw you as anything less than my own daughter. From the first moment I held you, I knew you were mine, not because of blood, but because of love. Love makes a family, not names on paper. Forgive your mother if you can. Life is short, and she has loved you every single day of it. And as for Michael, don't let resentment steal the peace you deserve. He was my friend once. He was the man who gave you your first heartbeat. I was the man who gave you a home. Together, we gave you everything we could. Always remember, You were born from love, raised by love, and meant to share love. That's all that matters. Dad, by the time she finished reading, tears streamed down her cheeks. She pressed the bracelet to her chest, a delicate silver band with 3 small charms, a heart, a piano key, and a tiny letter E. Her mom reached across the table, holding her hand. He wanted you to know he never saw you as anyone else's daughter, Margaret whispered. He used to say, that girl has the world in her eyes. Emily smiled through the tears. He was right about one thing. Love makes a family. Michael wiped his eyes quietly, his voice low and full of emotion. Robert was a better man than I'll ever be. I'll be grateful to him for the rest of my life. Margaret turned to him. He'd want you to stay, not as a replacement but as family. Michael nodded, his voice trembling. Then I'll do my best to honor that. That afternoon, Daniel returned home. When he heard everything, he was quiet at first, but then he hugged his mother tight and said, "Family's family. That's all that matters." Together, they all walked outside as the snow began to fall again. The town square bells rang softly in the distance. Echoing through Maplewood, Emily stood between her mom and Michael, watching the snowflakes melt on her gloves. There was no bitterness left, only a strange peace. Her mom leaned over and whispered, "Do you forgive me?" Emily looked at her, at the woman who had carried so many secrets, so many hopes, and smiled gently. "I do, Mom. I really do." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were happy ones. "Then that's my real Christmas gift." They all laughed softly. The world seemed lighter somehow, as if every truth, no matter how heavy, had finally settled where it belonged. That night, Emily sat by the piano again. The fire crackled beside her. She opened the lid and pressed one key, the same soft note that had filled their home every Christmas. Then she began to play. Slowly at first, then with confidence. The melody was the same song her father used to play, but now it felt different. It carried 3 hearts instead of one, as the music drifted through the house. Margaret closed her eyes and rested her head on Michael's shoulder. Emily played until the last note faded, then whispered quietly, "This is for all of us." And for the first time in many years, love didn't feel divided. It felt whole. The end.